ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world, our listeners, our viewers, our members. Welcome to Islamic Literary Society's podcast presentation. We have an esteemed guest today. And before I introduce our esteemed guest, I just want to mention a few things about ILS. And this, our viewers, our listeners know, Alhamdulillah, and by the grace of God, we've progressed so far within the last few years, and that's been because of your support. ILS was founded in 2019 with the aim of promoting and fostering and developing a heightened appreciation of authors, including literary works. It focuses on literary works of classical and contemporary Islamic scholarship. And we try and accomplish this through a number of ways. We have reading sessions, book launches, we have direct conversations with authors. One of the episodes today is a conversation with an author. We have talks published by authors, editors, speakers. We have critical reviews, we have events, online discussions, and various meetings. So we have a wide range of events that go on. Again, our aim is to encourage the revival of Islamic readership in our day-to-day lives and to increase literary awareness among ILS members and the wider public, Muslim and non-Muslim. Our response has been phenomenal from the non-Muslim community interested in the literary history of Islam. So we make no, we do not hide the fact at ILS that we are trying to nurture an interest and zeal in the reading of Islamic literature. We believe that there are authors, pre-modern authors, whose works one ought to read, but we are also emphatic on bringing to the attention of the wider community existing authors and the great works that they have done. And so if you would like to see more of these kind of programs, please support ILS and spread the Islamic literary legacy. This is only possible through your support and through your donations. And now on to our esteemed guest. I'm really excited, like I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers will be excited, having heard about who will be on the program. And this is no other than our esteemed Professor Sheikh Muzaffar Iqbal. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah.
What an honor. I sit here privileged speaking to you, and inshallah, I hope our listeners and viewers will benefit from today because it's a fantastic book. And I'll be mentioning something about the book by way of an introduction, but just to give an unfortunate, a truncated introduction to the Sheikh. He has phenomenal biography. The Sheikh has been, and I believe currently president of the Center for Islamic Sciences Canada. The Sheikh has worked in senior positions as director, as advisor on a number of committees, ComStec, the Ministerial Standing Committee on Scientific and Technological Cooperation of the OIC, and I think many of our viewers and listeners would know the Sheikh with his period at the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The Sheikh has had a spell as director of the Scientific Corporation of the Pakistani Academy of Sciences. He was the director of Science and Religion course program at the Center of Theology and Natural Sciences at Berkeley. He established, to my knowledge, Sheikh, please correct me, he established the Center for Islam and Science in Canada, Alberta, Canada. I think it was renamed later on as a Center for Islamic Sciences. He's initiated a number of projects. For example, one of them is the first in the English language integrating encyclopedia of the Quran, exclusively based primarily on the Islamic sources. This is abbreviated as IEQ, the Integrated Encyclopedia of the Quran. It's a phenomenal work. I think it was published 2013, as far as I remember. I think it's now online. It's been reconfigured online. He's the editor of a journal of Islamic perspectives on science and civilization called Islamic Sciences, formerly known as Islam and Science. Prof Iqbal has published works on the Islamic faith in general, in Sufism, Muslim matters, Islam's relation with modernity and science. I really cannot go through all of the professor's work. He's published in Urdu, English. He's got, his works have been translated in various languages as well. And so I know for a fact that most of the academic audience will know the Sheikh from his works in Islam and science, and being the editor of a number of science series for leading university and academic presses. But today I really want to talk about a fantastic book. And I know that this will be part of our reading classes and reading sessions. And this is the book Dawn in Medina, A Pilgrim's Passage. And this was, I think, initially published by Islamic Book Trust. I have my copy here. And so really, Sheikh, I really want to welcome you again. It's an honor to have you here at ILS, and thank you for giving your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting me, and Jazakallah for your very kind words. I don't really deserve what you said, but Allah's blessing.
It's not enough. It's not enough. And I know the readers are and listeners are excited, and viewers are excited for the episode. Just to introduce the book, that'll be the Sheikh's sort of discussion and presentation today. I mean, this book, Born in Medina, and I think our viewers who are watching, who will be watching this program, can see it in the background. Dawn in Medina, A Pilgrim's Passage. I mean, this is to me like a sort of dual genre. Anyone who's read the book will know that this is the Sheikh's sort of personal journey or sojourn in Medina al-Munawwara, in the city, in the prophetic city in Medina, but interwoven with the Sirah Mutahara, so the blessed life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. And the two genres are seamlessly sort of blended in together. And before I sort of hand it over to the Sheikh, I do have a few questions to begin with. And first and foremost, Sheikh, regarding Dawn in Medina, what made you write this book, this kind of sort of dual genre of your own personal journey, as well as weaving the seerah of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Out of all the books I have written, this is the most personal book that anyone who knows my work, this is the most personal work that I have written. And I was very reluctant to publish it, actually. And I kept it for a number of years. And after my month-long stay in the blessed place, and the journey itself was undertaken at a time in my life when a major crisis hit me in the form of shattering of a dream with which I had returned to Pakistan in 1990. And you mentioned ComStack, the OIC Ministerial Committee. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala combined in one place of work everything that I had done until that time. My interest in science, in Islam, in Ummah, in the reality of our life right now as Muslims. I saw this place to be something a position that I had, which would be very helpful for one of the main concerns in life, which is the state of the Ummah. Where are we going? What happened to us? And it wasn't a job. It just turned into a mission after 5 years of hard work. And suddenly everything just came to an end. One day, things were happening in Comstack, and I must say it very frankly that I became very disappointed by the highest level of leadership. This refers to the president of Pakistan at that time, Farooq Ahmad Laghari, whom I had approached to restructure Comstack so that it becomes a real organization that can do something even within its own limited resources. And it was possible. So he promised, and I wrote a detailed plan. But when the time came, he just backtracked. And I was just so appalled by the situation that I resigned.
You mentioned that in introduction, Sheikh, when
I
you
mentioned that
returned
in
to
the
Pakistan. Yeah. And then
Right.
you found the institution to be so recalcitrant to the sort of changes that you had sort of injected, the ideas you'd injected in the structure. Yeah, you mentioned that in the intro. I think
Right,
yeah.
right. And that this crisis was, of course, personal at one level, but it was also the realization of the crisis of the Ummah. Unfortunately, I shouldn't use the word fortunately. I don't believe in fortunes. But
Yeah.
the reality is that our leadership is I mean, we have what we deserve. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoints people according to the nature of the Ummah. But it's very sad. You know, what's happening right now in Gaza, in Palestine. Like it's just unbelievable how far we have fallen. So that crisis led me into a state of psychological, emotional, spiritual place where I just seemed to have hit a wall in front of me. Like there was absolutely no way out. I couldn't, my health started to deteriorate, and like I just couldn't do anything. So after, as I mentioned in the book, after 2 years, one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just took me. And you see that old woman saying, you cannot go to Medina until the
Unless
invitation
you're
comes.
called. Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot go without the invitation coming from the high places. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened a way. He took me there. And what happened there was just extraordinary. Like this is a spiritual experience of the most intense kind that I've experienced in my life. I still cherish every single moment. I have it was winter, and I took one of those woolen overall chadar with me.
Yeah.
I use that to sleep. I use that to cover my. I still have that, and I still cherish the fragrance of that place in that. So the what prompted me to write the book again wasn't really something intentional. When I returned, and we will inshallah go through what happened in those 30 days of itikaf in the masjid, my heart was transformed. And the whole book basically was written in 3 sittings, the entirety of it. And then I kept it for a number of years.
It's a very personal. I'm gonna, as we go along, Sheikh, and if you permit me, there are some certain moments where you really do, your emotions are really on the pages. And I will come to some of those quotes, inshallah, of course, as we go along. But before I sort of allow you to sort of indulge this wonderful book, Sheikh, I remember in the introduction, you had some strong words. You're in a meeting in Dhaka, I think it was, in Bangladesh, and
right,
and you make a reference to the OIC. I'm just going to quote it. Feel free if you want to duck it, but I just wanted the viewers and the listeners to see, wallahi, there's humor in here as well. So you said, quote, I'm quoting the Sheikh now. During the course of that defining meeting, i.e. in Dhaka, I realized the true nature of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. It was a thoroughly corrupt organization designed to serve the purposes of those who have usurped control of the Muslim world. All the higher officials of the organization were fully aware of the true nature of this organization and derisively nicknamed it, "Oh, I see. This cruel and painful realization made me recoil." End quote. Now, Sheikh, I'm smiling. Obviously, it's a serious point. But just before we kind of move on to the book, because you talked about the hal, the condition of the ummah, what can you explain a bit, if you would like to now, about sort of the structural challenges we face regarding the progression of Muslim thought? I'm not just talking about in science and Islam, but do we have structural hindrances for progress,
Yes,
or are there other
right.
causes? Would you put it down to, Sheikh?
Yes, I think this phrase that came, that is in the book, "Oh, I see," really sums up OIC. And if you recall, 1969, when the Muslim Ummah first encountered a major crisis in the form of what happened to Masjid al-Aqsa at that time. And looking back, ironically, it was the king of Morocco who had and they continue to have the closest relationship with the Zionist state,
Yeah.
who said, "Oh, we need to have an organization." And they gathered all the kings and prime ministers and presidents and established this organization. In looking back, to be very frank, I think these organizations, the Arab League, this organization, they all came into existence through a very well thought of plan. And the plan is because in vacuum, other institutions, the real institutions, would come into existence, because the Ummah is really alive now. After 300 years of siyasta, inshallah, we are awake. We know what's going on. This new generation, like your generation, I'm so optimistic, because this generation is well read, and especially those who have reconnected with Islamic tradition of learning. This is a phenomenal change in the last 300 years after we went to sleep. Now, those who are watching us, they know how to have pressure relief valves. So pressure relief valves means that on critical points and issues, you make a storm.
Yeah.
And the storm is, oh, all the presidents are flying in, all the kings are flying in, there is a big conference happening, there is a big meeting happening, and we are going to just come up with a solution to what is happening in Bosnia, what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in Kashmir, what is happening in Burma. We are just at the brink of bringing a real solution. And what do? I mean, they pass a resolution. They pass resolution after resolution, and nothing happens after that. But the pressure has been diffused.
Yeah.
I witnessed, and this is not made up. I witnessed a clerk in the Ministry of Science and Technology in Pakistan duplicating previous year's resolutions
Wow.
of OIC. And the funny thing was, one of them was printed and distributed with the previous date. This is the state of this organization that is supposed to represent the Ummah. It's just deeply, it's heartache. It's really, really painful.
No, I think, and you didn't mince your words then, in the introduction, and I think, that resonated when I read it. I thought, right, I've got to talk to the Sheikh about that. And
I said this at the highest places in person as well.
Yeah.
Like, where it needed to be said, and people know that, and therefore I realize I have no place in this structure. I have no place in this organization.
Wow. Yeah, and I guess, sort of leading on to this journey, this particular sort of puncture in your life, the calling has come. Can you pick us up and take us on this
Yes.
journey?
So you arrive in Jeddah, and you're in this state of extreme poverty. You're in extreme, you know your state, you are in need, you are literally dying inside, and you have this little glimmer of hope as the taxi moves from the airport towards Mecca. With every single step, you are coming close to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is this hope that you have made this effort, and you don't know what's coming. You could just go and come back, or maybe some openings would happen. We have absolutely no idea. So you do your regular all the azkar and everything, and then you find yourself suddenly in this sea of people going round and round and round, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Like it's just that, when you are in the presence of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's just a different experience, very different experience. And then, of course, there is this desire to touch the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone, and your heart is just opening up to the possibilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may send your way, and you don't know. You are in, I always remember the dua of Musa alayhi salam, when he sat on the tree. He's running for his life. He's got no home, no family. He's in a strange land, and he has just given water to the ladies, their flock. And he sits under the tree and he says, "Oh Allah, if you were to send me something at this time, I am in need. Inni fakir. I am fakir." So that sense of being utterly, and I always think of the beggar's bowl in our classical literary tradition. We have and when it's totally empty, when your begging bowl is totally empty, so you are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's house, and you are in this state. So that was my first entrance, and I was conscious of my journey. I was conscious of my state. I was deeply conscious of the desert I was in spiritually. It was a state of where, now I look back and I really see something, blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this whole process, because that led to the openings that I could have never imagined.
This was in December, wasn't it, Chef? When you landed?
Yes, it was in December. Yes.
I mean, for those of you who read the book, the Sheikh is very descriptive in his language. It's something which I'll mention later. I remember one part you talked about. I think it was you talked about the area of Hatim, and then you talked about Rukn al-Yamani, and then the way you described how when you're doing your tawaf, that you were gliding gliding across the marble floor among thousands of others.
Yes.
So subhanAllah, it's very rich. The language used is very descriptive, Sheikh, throughout the book. Was that intentional? Was that, sorry to sort of go off track, but I want to forget if I don't ask. Was it, the literary flow?
Yeah, I had no idea that I will actually be writing about these experiences. At the moment of experience, you're just in the experience itself, especially in that state of total poverty, inner emptiness of that kind. You are just in the experience. And I remember when the opening came, I think I mentioned it in the 6th or the 7th round, suddenly there was this opening to the Hajar al-Aswad.
Yes, it was.
It was just a huge crowd there, but it was just so made so easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just, somebody just pushes back and the whole crowd kind of spreads.
And you mentioned how, thousands of silver lines sparkled, the stone glistened. Right. SubhanAllah. And that's when you felt a deep stir inside you, didn't you? And then
it did. It was a beautiful opening, but my heart was really intent on this month-long itikaf that I had intended to do it in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. And so when I left Mecca, that again was really a journey. I don't know, in the description of the going to Medina in the bus journey, where this young man reminds everyone to send salawat on the Prophet.
Yes.
People are suddenly transformed by that. And anyone who has gone to Medina by road, you know, every time I go there, I'm constantly conscious of the journey that the Prophet ﷺ made for the hijrah. You know, in fact, I had gone on that road once, the Tariq al-Hijrah, the old, and I mentioned that now the buses are just on this new road. But just to imagine two of them, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq and the Prophet ﷺ, in that state where the Meccans are following them. It's a life and death situation for them. Like, you know, the episode in the cave. I mentioned the cave later on, I think, or is it before going to Medina?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, it's on my return. Yeah. So that presence of the Prophet ﷺ started as soon as I left Mecca. As soon as the Umrah was over, I was in a different state altogether. This connection, which I had thought, started to emerge, and as I think I mentioned in one of my favorite episodes, and actually real experiences, when my feet touched the sand of Medina.
Yes.
You know, that sentence that perchance one day the blessed feet were upon these pebbles of sand, like they were there. That really.
Allah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know.
Possible, you know, this
This
sand is so old that it could be that the blessed feet of the Prophet ﷺ touched those very particles of sand.
I mean, I know I can't. I know we're going through. I mean, you talked about the Mount Thor. You just briefly mentioned that. You briefly mentioned that. There was something in there you mentioned on there. Now it slipped my mind. I thought would have been important for the listeners, because you do describe the mount in quite some detail, and then obviously you bring some your own anecdotes in there, but you also bring some references.
Yes, I think that is on. Let's do it in sequence. So
yeah, this is what I was going to say, Chef, if you don't mind.
From Medina. And also the night I spent at the cave of Hira. That in itself was an extraordinary experience, to spend the night on Jabal al-Nur.
Yes.
In Hira. Inshallah, we talk about that. But the thing that immediately pulled me into a different reality as soon as I arrived in Medina was the life of these workers. My cousin Zulfikar was there, as I mentioned in the book, right? Their house, their life, their experience in Medina, I started to realize that there are worlds within worlds in this city. Like, there are countless levels of existence in this city. The king and the governor and all those people are sitting in one place, and these workers are in another place. And then I developed a relationship with the workers in the masjid, people who are cleaning, you know, who are hired to clean the masjid of Prophet. So there are these levels, multiple levels of lives which started to emerge right at the point of entrance to Medina. First was this group of young people, single, who had left their families in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, other places, to do, you know, what economic circumstances demanded them to do, but they were conscious of being in the city of the Prophet ﷺ, and their love for the Prophet ﷺ, and their self-consciousness that, oh, I'm spending 12 hours in a hotel, building this hotel or whatever, and I'm unable to go to the masjid. The spiritual torment of being so close to the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, but not being able to go there, except for Friday. You know, this is huge injustice. This is slavery. This is modern, and this is happening even now. These hotels where we go and stay, all of them are constructed with the blood and sweat of people who are in the city, who want to be in the masjid, but they are not allowed to be in the masjid.
And
Can
they
you
don't
imagine?
complain. I think there was a reference in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't complain. This is the city of Medina. It's going to be harsh, and they recall how the
Right.
Prophet's companions, found it difficult in Medina, in Yathrib, from Mecca, because of the sort of harsh conditions. And subhanallah, that love for Medina even makes they're willing to take that suffering and pain.
Exactly. And person asked, and these are all real people in the book. Like there is nothing made up. These are real human beings. And every single one of them says, and I heard from their own tongues, I would suffer anything for Medina.
Yeah.
Anything for Medina. I just want to be here. Anything is okay. You know, that kind of love. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And these are simple people, like they're not scholars or anything. They just have the love of the Prophet Islam in their blood. Like it's just there.
SubhanAllah. This is it. The love draws them to this place.
Yes, yes. And the local people too. I mean, there is a sense of belonging in that city. There is we know people who just go there to die.
Yeah.
I want to die in Medina, so I'm just here, right? And I remember, I don't know if it's in the book or not, but Sayyidina Bilal left Medina after the demise of the Prophet.
Yes.
He left. He couldn't stand to be there without him. The pain was just incredible. And many years later, when Sayyidina Umar was going to Jerusalem, and he met him, and he said, come with me. And he was very reluctant to come, but he came, and he said, I just want to hear your adhan. So Sayyidina Bilal returned to Medina, and he was asked to give the adhan, call the adhan, and he said, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah. When he came to Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, he started to cry.
Yeah.
And we have eyewitnesses of reports that the whole city cried with that. The whole city cried on that day. And then he left again. He couldn't stand that separation from the beloved. He couldn't stand the separation.
Sheikh,
But,
sorry, Afwan, please.
Yeah. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, so from chapter 2, which talks about the Mount Thawr, your journey then moves on to chapter 3, which is about the road to Medina, the Tariqul
Right.
Hijrah that you talked about. Before I ask you to maybe elaborate on that chapter, I can't remember, page, I can't remember, it's 55. It's there near early on. You have a moment where, how can I describe it? You talk about your whole being penetrated, and you talked about the ayah of Surah Ar-Rahman, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and that everything will perish. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. So in a very personal disclosure, if I can put it like that, there was a very strong emotional moment we see at that time where you felt for some reason you had been ungrateful. I can't remember whether that was the term, but you felt very you're full of tears, and tears were just flowing, and you felt trembling and fear. Can you explain what that feeling was, Sheikh? Why was that an emotional moment?
Yes. You see, looking back now, it's been so many years. But looking back at that time, when you are hit with something like that and you process it, you develop a sense of guilt,
Right.
because obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is generous, he's kind, he's just. What happened to you happened because of your own deeds. Now, qadar is very complex issue. You need to accept what is destined. And we don't even, as I said, we don't even know what is good for us. When we love something so much, when we are so attached to an idea or a job or a place or a project, we lose sight of we really believe in it. That's why we are doing it, and we lose sight of some things. So at that time, going on the road, all of these things start to emerge in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your psyche, in your being. That what happened to you, you deserved it because you were ungrateful to what was given to you. Why did you resign? That's giving up. That wasn't right. You know, you go through all of that, and you feel a sense of it's more than guilt. It's a sense of acceptance of your own shortcomings. I think that's perhaps. So with that comes an opening, because once you know, Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam tarhamna, like it's just that, you know, you have to acknowledge your own shortcoming. That's the first step of any tawbah. That's the first step of any kind of recourse. That you know, this is one of our scholars. He said that Iblis was asked, "Why did you not prostrate when I ordered you to prostrate?" And he started to make arguments, justifications for his lack of obedience to the command. Oh, he was created from clay, you made me from fire, all of that. When Adam alayhi salam is asked the same question, why did you disobey me? What does he and his spouse do? ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم ترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. Look at the difference between the two. There is an acceptance of the shortcoming immediately and a request for forgiveness. But the kibr of shaitan, of Iblis, takes him the other way.
Yeah.
This is a major difference. So we are very small people. We are very, we have so many shortcomings. And so at that time, I think that's all that was going through my head. That
Right. Yeah, and it was a very sort of poignant moment. And then after that, you mentioned the durood, the salawat,
yes,
people on the people on the bus, and how
right in the bus. Yes,
yes,
right.
yeah.
And that was real loud. This young man who started it, and suddenly the entire atmosphere of the bus just transformed, because until then, as you read, people were just chatting this and that.
Yeah.
And he just reminded,
Right.
oh, look, people, we are coming close to Medina. What are you doing? Wake up. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful.
Oh, ya Allah. And yeah, I mean, what a great sort of etiquette that is, you know, just building the salawat as you get closer. You mentioned Salamu alayki ya Rasulullah, ya Habib Allah, edging closer and closer. SubhanAllah, it's a wonderful chapter as well. I think after that chapter, you move on to, I think it was. Is there anything particularly else you wanted to mention about it? Because it is quite an important chapter. Then you go on to talk about Medina itself, the arrival, your arrival in Medina Munawwara.
Right.
From there. So, what was that like?
The site of the masjid that really brought tremendous joy and expectation. As you know, from a distance, when you see the masjid, when you see the minars, I think that movement, just as when you enter Mecca, there is a barrier, physical barrier that we cross. We enter into the sacred, physical sacred space, like from being outside to enter into the
Yeah.
sacred realm. There is a perception of now being in a place that is different from where you were before.
Right.
I still remember very clearly what happened at that time, and when from a distance you see the minars of the masjid.
And then I think once you're in the masjid, and Nabi, you talk about how you are then before the role that I think before the Prophet's grave itself, and you talk about awe, your fear, your reverence, and you make a supplication, Sheikh, and you say, and I quote, facing the metal grill in front of the place where the Prophet lived and died, I silently prayed, O Messenger of Allah, I ask for your intercession and request Allah through you that I die as a Muslim upon your religion and way, unquote. Sheikh, why did you do that? I mean,
Yes.
why do you think the intercession of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam is so important for
Right.
Muslims? There's an issue about this, isn't it, with some quarters in the Ummah?
Yes, yes. The intercession of the one who was sent as a mercy, we seek that intercession all the time, because our own deeds are not going to take us to Jannah. This acknowledgement that happened even during the life of the Prophet himself, his companions knew that there is something very special in the person, in the last of the messengers, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose. And he chose all the prophets in pre-eternity. And he took a mithaq, in addition to the common alastu bi rabbikum, that you and I and everyone else have that covenant. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the zuriya of Adam alayhi salam, as in Surah Al-Araf, there is mention in the Quran of another mithaq, another covenant with the prophets, on top of that general covenant with humanity. And within that special covenant, the last of the messengers, as Imam Shafi said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him in pre-eternity, and his special station is this intercession. And he himself told us that. He has been granted 5 of those very special things that no other prophet before him had. And one of them is that he is our intercessor. So I was conscious of that as well, but this dua has dual aspect, because I was, when you go to somebody's house and you want to be there for a whole month, and you are a guest there, and you are a guest, you have consciousness of being a guest, so you want to be courteous to the host, you want to sort of have it. And I made the trip specifically, and I sort of, when the openings happened, you realize that your invitation has come, that you are going there. So my first encounter then had a dual sort of, as a host, I literally felt that I'm in a place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kindly brought me, but now it is the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. And as you read the beginning of the Itikaf, I want to mention the sighting of the moon episode that really thrilled everybody in the city. you remember that episode I was standing at a shop,
Yeah.
buying some dates or something, and suddenly the announcement came and then this person was selling, forgot everything, and suddenly there is this joy in the city that Ramadan has started.
We're
And
gonna.
I just
Afwan,
returned
please.
back immediately to the masjid because I wanted to be there the first night.
Yeah, no, you talk about that when you know your sojourn, your month-long sojourn in. Yeah,
Right.
you talk about that. I think in your chapter 5, because in the chapter which we're discussing now about your arrival in Medina, um, takes us. You make some mention about some historical matters related to area of the Prophet ﷺ. Then from there, you move us into a chapter which you call the villa.
Yes,
And
right.
here is where you mentioned, Sheikh, and you mentioned this earlier at the beginning, where you said perhaps this is this in old Medina, perhaps the Prophet's feet touched these grains of sand,
Right.
and it made you feel joyous, inside your heart. It made you feel joyous inside your heart that you were finally walking on the sand and stones of the beloved city, as you put it, in, quote unquote. But just before I ask you a bit about what this chapter is, and for the readers, you kind of make a reference to how Medina had become modernized in this kind of
Right.
like any old other city now. It lost
Yes.
that flavor. I think you put it, you used the quote words flavor. Why, did that pain you? Did that sort of make you feel that the old Medina has now disappeared? The only way I'm going to have access to it is if I transport myself in my own imagination.
Yeah, it's still every time you go there, both Makkah and Medina, it's one of the most painful sights, the transformation of these two sacred places into these modern, um, these things have no place. We don't need to have Kentucky Fried Chicken sign right in front of the Haram. I mean, this is really um, so the painful reality of Alhamdulillah, I had in my imagination, I still have in my imagination the real city, the real old Medina that used to be there. But your heart longs to see that. It's not really nostalgia, but even in secular places, even in England, you you go, they have preserved their history. Like you still have these old places and even a stone with the name of somebody, Newton or some other people. They have preserved all of those things. Whereas this modern culture has really destroyed so much of that ambience of the city. And this happened so quickly with the oil money, like all these new things which emerged. So there was a longing. And one, I still remember very clearly the episode that you just mentioned about the sand. Alhamdulillah, they couldn't transport that sand out. It's still there. You can still have access to that sand.
What was you mentioned the chapter being the villa, and then you described the living conditions, Zulfiqar and others were
Right.
living. What was the need to mention that, Sheikh?
Um,
Because it is
I
quite
think
a serious point.
right. I think one of the this is kind of a strange book because it's a combination of uh, literary activity. It merges personal travel account with the history, with the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, with the contemporary reality of which I'm deeply conscious and I'm very connected with that, with the state of the Ummah. Uh, the need for that chapter, the culture of the villa. Um, it's one of those episodes in our history where we have developed a new form of slavery. And I really wanted to highlight the slavish, structural slavishness that has emerged in the Middle East, bringing these people away from their wives. You probably remember this intense longing they have for their families, for their children. Like people have spent 20, 30 years in that places. They have seen their wives and children occasionally. That's a tragic situation. You know, you don't do that to people in this age. Like at least have their wives and children with them, at least have a family. This is really, really oppressive. So I wanted to really, and I wasn't really, I didn't choose to be there, but the love of these people was also something. As you read how they would offer you everything, you're just strangers to them. Like I had one cousin, Zulfkar was my cousin, but everyone else in the village just was unknown to me. But they were so kind, they were so generous.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned in quite detail the roommates and the condition and how they just have hardly any time to do anything. They're just so
Yes.
yeah. But that chapter, almost like sort of not just a despondent sort of tone, you now lift the reader into the sixth chapter, which is the retreat.
Yes.
Things, alhamdulillah, that takes a kind of there is now a new rejuvenated immersion into Medina now that with Ramadan, with the Salat al-Tarawih beginning. What was that chapter about? What was this? This is it. You now have a month long. You spend a whole month, Sheikh, in Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina. I mean,
Subhanallah. If they say every book has a heart. This chapter is the heart of that book. This retreat, which I actually entered in one state and I came out in a different state, and I had no idea what the month holds. And you go there, and all of these things mentioned in the chapter, they emerged slowly because there is a rhythm of life inside the masjid. There is a rhythm of life that you come to know as you now basically you have consciously locked yourself within this boundary. The world outside is disappearing rapidly. Like everything that we normally have in our day is gone. Food and like everything. You're just basically immersed. That's the word. You're immersed in a different rhythm of life. And this rhythm of life started to emerge for me. Where are you going to sleep? Where are you going to pray? Where are you going to sit? Where are you going to read your Quran? If you need to go away from crowded places, how are you going to find that corner where you can just be alone?
well, your new home became
My
just
new home,
adjacent to the Bab al-Hijra, right?
Right. It just that I still remember that place. Every time I go there, I spend time in that place where I used to, which became my home because masjid is so big. But this Bab al-Hijra corner, and what happens there is just extraordinary. Like you just start to notice things which you would not notice otherwise if you're just in and out from the masjid. One thing that I still recall and that really moves me still is that everyone there, especially during the month of Ramadan, everyone was totally absorbed in their own state. And the intensity of those, I still recall that one person I mentioned there, somebody from Africa, who actually had, I could feel the waves around him. He was so focused in zikr, he would still sit erect, totally straight up, like his back was so straight. He would be facing the wall and he could sit there for hours. That one person was, he was so focused. Like if you try to sit for a few hours in a place, but that person was extraordinary. This person I mentioned who would come very early in the morning to recite the Quran out loud. The blind Afghan, you know, the one who was.
Yeah.
This chapter is so full of people like this. These people became my household. And one of the most favorite places was, of course, Ashab Sufa, the platform of the Ashab Sufa.
Yeah. There's a significance of the Ahl Sufa, isn't it?
Yes, it was.
That platform. You mentioned it a few times in the book, actually.
Yeah, a few times. Yeah, because, you know, when you sit there, you realize there are only 64 places on this very special platform. Only 64 people are invited to sit at a given time.
Right.
And then you notice that this old man is always there. How does he find his place? Because this platform is so crowded, everyone wants to be there. But this old Afghan is always there. How does that happen? Like, this is practically impossible for someone to be on that platform day after day after day.
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this opening for him. He was very old. And we had this. Another thing I want to mention is that when you are there for a month, you start to recognize other people who are there for a month or more. Then you start to recognize that, oh, these people actually are local people living in Medina, but they spend all their time in the masjid. And they have very special personalities, and they are there with a purpose. Yani, there is so much life there in the masjid. Like when we go for Umrah or when we just go for a visit, we don't notice those things.
Well, your account, for the readers who know the book, who have read it, will know that the chapter in the retreat, it becomes like a diary. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Right.
and then you kind of you take the reader through several of these sort of events. You mentioned how a routine is established, familiar faces, the brotherhood, the sort of love, the conviviality. But there are some unpleasant events as well. You mentioned in there, Sheikh, the guards and some unsavory incidents.
Yes.
Which is
And
unfortunate.
you know the episode of the vacuum cleaner, the person collecting dust. Yani all kinds of bid'ahs and almost kufr, those things.
Yeah.
Somebody, yeah.
The-
One thing I don't know if it comes across when you read the book in this chapter. You know, the month of Ramadan has stages, as well known. 3 stages: the first Ashra, the second Ashra, the third Ashra.
Yes.
I wasn't conscious of what was happening to me. It only became clear, and I think I mentioned this in the last part of the chapter, that with the arrival of the last Ashara, there was a sudden change. There was a sudden change inside me And I still remember that it was with the beginning of the last 10 nights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened something very, very, very dear to me even now. I tremble, literally tremble when I think of that. There was a place in Riyadul Jannah. You remember that episode, the Riyadul Jannah, where, you know, it was only afterward that I realized that there were 1 million people every night of the last 10 nights, 1 million people. And Riyadul Jannah was made so vast for me. Like every night, I was always there. Can you imagine how, like, how can it happen that there are 3 people towards the end of this chapter? Salahuddin,
Yes.
the one from Sialkot. Yeah.
That was
So the first,
yeah. Sorry, Chef, please.
yeah, the first row in Riyadul Jannah, next to the green grill, the third place. That opening was great blessing, great blessing.
I mean, this is what I'm saying. It's a very sort of you know, you really pour it out, and you know, the reader really gathers, you know, how, you know, the details by which you describe your own experiences. The reader does get a huge insight from just reading that diary, and I think doing it in that style, I think really works, rather
Yeah,
than it
that
being
diary style. Yes, yes.
So that was fantastic. And you know, when, as the readers will know, final, I think on the 29th of Ramadan, the final dua you mentioned as well. But even before that, you'd mentioned some of the powerful openings and things that happened to you. Then you, I think, you take us from the retreat chapter into joy and sorrow.
Yes.
2 powerful emotions that you say, you know, fills you. Why was that? Yeah.
So the one thing I still remember, I think it was Laylatul Qadr, that night in Riyadul Jannah, I was praying Nawafil, and in the state of sajda, I felt that I've been invited to go to the cave of Hira from here. I had it's hard, you know, it's hard to sort of objectively say anything about these things, because what comes to your heart could be from your own nafs, could be from your own desire, could be something that is cast into your heart by a good messenger. And these things happen to us. So I was conscious that this idea came to me from outside myself. I had no clue what I'm going to do next. I had no clue, you know, that this would happen. But this idea created tremendous joy, and it somehow compensated the sorrow of leaving Medina. Because when you are in the masjid for a whole month, you have become part of that life now. Like it's your life, and everything else has disappeared, and you are immersed in that, and suddenly you realize you have to go, like you have to leave this blessed presence. So that sorrow had a counterpart to it in this idea of, okay, you are going to go from here, but you are going to go to a very special place. Yeah. And the Eid prayer, mashallah,
Yes,
that was
yes.
great. Yeah.
But even in this chapter, Sheikh, you bring the historical events of Badr, and
Yes.
you
Yes.
weave Sirah. Actually, there's quite a long section of Sirah in here, and you're talking about the martyrdom of the Sahaba in this battle, and so it is quite important.
Yeah, I think this is one of the strange aspects of this book when I was writing it. Even when I was there, as I said, you're always conscious of those 11 years, which made Yathrib what it became. Had the Prophet ﷺ not gone to Yathrib, it wouldn't be Medina. And
Yeah,
when he went there, history transformed. Human history transformed with the Hijrah. We wouldn't have the world we have now. We wouldn't have the Ummah we have now without the Hijrah.
yeah.
And one of the fundamental decisive days of those 11 years is the day of Badr.
Mm.
Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has declared that day to be decisive day. Because that is the day when, can you imagine that in a remote place in the world, like sitting where we are sitting now, I don't know if you have gone to Badr itself. I went to Badr, a small place isolated from the world, where for a few hours, just for a few hours, 313 people on one side and 1,000 people on the other side. The history of the world is decided on that day through this encounter between the two. It's just such an extraordinary day in human history. Like right now, if you look at the state of the world, there are wars here and like literally thousands of people are being killed. This is 313 people on the one side and 1,000 on the other side. So to recall on that day of Eid, this Badr incident, there is a deep connection that between the two.
Yeah, I think after this chapter, you have the chapter of Uhud, and then you're very detailed about the events and the significances of Uhud. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That bit reads like almost like a seerah, like a seerah work. So
Right. Right.
you really take us into a deep dive into the events, um, and then the aftermath of the battle itself.
Yes. Yes.
And so that I think this is one of the most historical parts, like as in like seerah parts of the book. It's you have it interwoven in the other chapters, but in these two, I felt it was really historical, and readers would benefit from it enormously, because the chapter after that, which I think is called the circles or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. You now bring us back more or less, though you still mention historically matters, but you bring us back into your sort of journey now again to the story, as it were.
Right. Right.
Um,
And the circles, the chapter called Circles is really an outcome of this month-long retreat, uh, because we live in circles, we revolve in circles, right? In our spiritual, emotional, intellectual states, we are bound by circles. And because the Kaaba is the only place in the world where you can stand anywhere on the circumference of the circle and you'll still be facing the Qibla. You'll still be facing the Kaaba from like there is no other place in the world where you can literally be facing east, west, north, south when you are inside the courtyard. So, and then we are drawn into tawaf in a circular movement. We make the circular rounds around the Kaaba. So when I returned back to Mecca, I think what really captured my attention, and that's why I still remember very clearly, that the circle outside the courtyard in Mecca has a very disturbing this worldly life. Beggars, cigarette smokers, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, like all of those big stores and all the rest of it. It's such an extraordinary contrast to inside the circle, inside the, where you are. Now things have changed, even worse, people are on their cell phones around the Kaaba as well. But at that time, cell phones were not there. But this contrast of the circle, it's really very painful. And I want to mention one of my dreams. If I were to able to, or somebody, just imagine if around the Kaaba there were just this green, lush green space with grass and trees and just a space where there are no cars, there are no stores, there are no hotels. There's a monorail that brings people close to the haram. But we have say 10 miles of greenness around the Kaaba. It would be such a different place. So these circles that you come out and you see very painful situation in the outer circle.
Yeah, you even when you talk about in the first part of Hira, chapter 10, I think it was, you talk about the contrast where you felt so disappointed that this holy space where you're about to climb is now, full of people and antics.
Yes,
The sacredness that once had now been sort of replaced with these frivolities and sort of worldly engagements.
Right. And these two chapters, Hira, back then, and now, these again bring that contrast between the state of the ummah and the state of the place now. Like, why couldn't we preserve even Hira? Why are there all these commercial activities, people smoking, throwing their cigarettes, throwing these water bottles, all of that? There is no need for that, literally. Like, there is absolutely no reason for us not protecting the sacredness of that. After all, I mean, places are important. I remember in Hudaybiyah, there was this tree that is mentioned in the Quran where the companions took the Baitul Ridwan, the pledge of the divine pleasure that mentioned in the Quran. I mean, that's the most profound moment in the life of those companions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that after this, you are free, you can do whatever, you are forgiven. Like, this is such a huge event. And there was a tree. There was a tree there. Many years later, Sayyidina Umar, he was on his way to Mecca from Madinah, and he said, "Where is that tree? Where is that tree?" Like, when he was in Hudaybiyah, he's looking for the tree, and the tree is not there. And then he says, "Oh, it was only a tree." So, I mean, these symbols in any civilization, we don't worship the tree. We don't have, but to say, well, we destroyed this masjid, we destroyed this because people were doing bid'ahs and they are doing kufr, that's not a justification. So we could have preserved a lot of our history because symbols are important. History is important. Without history, we are nothing. Like, any people who have lost their history, they have lost everything. And history means monuments at a certain level. History means places, history means events, history, the Quran is revealed at this place. This cave, I don't know if we want to go into the details of the cave itself, which is again a very fascinating aspect of. Can you imagine that? And in this place, I don't know if you have been there or not, but anybody who goes, have you been there? MashaAllah. Can you imagine that in pre-history, pre-eternity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has these huge boulders placed in a way that creates this enclosure where only one person can stand at the entrance, and that entrance faces the Kaaba, and there is this triangular little space between the rocks from which fresh air is coming in. Like even now, if you go there in the middle of the summer, it's never hot. It's just an extraordinary place. And when I had this thought in my heart that you go and spend a night there, this was really, really extraordinary experience.
SubhanAllah. Sheikh, I know we're coming to sort of the terminus of the journey. You, even in your conclusion, your sort of afterword, your kind of conclusion to the book, you refer to this state of the ummah all the time. The current state of the ummah, the condition of the ummah, and its various institutions. That is a real running theme. Whether you directly mention it, whether or not you directly mention it, sometimes we get the impression from reading that you're alluding to this is the hal that we're in. I mean, where do you see the state of the ummah sort of reviving? Where do you see that? What is required for that to take place? You've identified considerably where you feel what factors led to our current state, but as a kind of concluding point, where do you think? How do we get the taraqqi?
You're right.
Where do you think that might lie?
This is a huge topic by itself.
Yes, I know.
Requires another conversation, but there are two things that I want to mention. One is that this ummah is the last of the ummahs. There is no more prophet coming. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that this deen is going to stay until the day of Qiyamah. This is something that we believe in, but this is also historically verifiable for anyone, a believer or not a believer, because there is no other ummah, there is no other people who have a book like the Quran. There is no other book like the Quran. And I'm not saying this only because who I am, but it's objectively verifiable that there is absolutely no other book which has existed for all these centuries without disappearing, without changes, without any distortion. Right? One thing. Second, Wallahu ghalibu ala amri. Ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of the overall human history. Of course, we harvest what we sow. Of course, we harvest what we sow. But this ummah is blessed with two things specifically which no other ummah has. And these two things are so solidly anchored that nothing can destroy. One is the Quran. As we know, nothing can happen. Like people can go and burn something, but they're not burning the Quran. It's not right. The second is the extraordinary amount of information that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved of this last blessed prophet that is sent. It's just incredible how much we know. And if you live in Medina, yani if you spend time there, you can actually feel his blessed presence walking on these streets. Like you can still remember what happened on a given day. You can still actually feel these events which were happening there. There is no other human being whose life has been preserved to such an extent with a chain of transmission going back to the eyewitness accounts. You remember the episode, I just remember that, of Sayyidina Abu Lubaba?
Yeah, you mentioned that quite a bit.
In the chapter there, in the Ustuwana Tauba.
Yes.
That event is so vivid. What he did, like he just felt in his heart that he has betrayed the trust of the Prophet. He runs back to the masjid and he ties himself to this pillar. And day after day, he's just tied there. He said, I'm not leaving until I'm forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when somebody said to the Prophet ﷺ to intercede, he said, no, but he has already made his case directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm not going to intercede. Right? And then the ayah comes forgiving him. And then this is Fajr time, right? And the Prophet ﷺ received this ayah.
Yes.
And I think
6 nights, I think he was tied. Yeah, he was tied.
He was tied there, right?
Yeah, 6
and
nights,
Salma says, shall I go and tell him? Right? Then these are vivid accounts preserved with full chain of transmission. There is no other ummah that has it. So we have a perpetual source of renewal through the tradition. So my hope is that these days, and they come, tilka al-ayyam nudawiluha bainan nas. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these are the days that we alter among people. I think our time is just starting now. The ummah, it's just extraordinary what happened in the middle of the 20th century. It has never happened to this ummah before. In the middle of the 20th century, after the Second World War, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened lands for Muslims which they could not have imagined opening. Until then, for the previous centuries, we always went to other places either as conquerors or as traders.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine from Medina to Samarkand and Bukhara, like the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, Kusum Abbas, the son of Uncle Abbas, like he's buried in Samarkand. Just imagine, like one generation, how far is Samarkand from Medina?
Yeah.
So those openings happened for the Ummah. But then came this whole collapse in the 17th century. But starting in the middle of the 20th century, something totally extraordinary happened. And that is the opening of the Western world, Europe and then North America, for Muslims. And we arrived here the way we arrived. Allah knows how all of that happened. But what it means now is that there is tremendous amount of wealth in terms of scholarship, in terms of resources, which we didn't have for the last 300 years. The kind of scholarship that is now available, even just the availability of books, it was unimaginable even 50 years ago. People were struggling to find the fasirs, like not to talk about other works. And these opportunities are inshallah. Plus, there is a second aspect, and that is your neighbors are people who have never known Islam. But now they see you, they see me, they see Muslims walking around talking. Like this is a personal encounter of the first order. So if we go out and we walk as a Muslim, we talk as Muslims, we interact with people as Muslim, this introduction to Islam, to a world which had absolutely no access to this kind of understanding of Islam, is a huge opening. It's just a huge opening. So despite all our weaknesses and corruption and all these self-made, self-appointed kings and prime ministers and presidents, inshallah, there is a change coming. So that's my hope.
Oh, that's a lovely, optimistic message for everyone, Sheikh. I know, being conscious of time, I feel, Sheikh, at some point we may have to do a part 2 or more deeper dive into the book. It's a read. I think those who haven't read it yet should read it, and it's a great, not just a personal outpouring of one's own experience, but it's also an observation along the way of our situation as an ummah, and how we've also lost a connection physically and geographically in sort of sacred space to that site, the blessed site of obviously Mecca al-Mukarramah, but here particularly of Medina al-Munawwara. And it's a wonderful read, and I would urge our listeners and readers and viewers to take the book up, and inshallah when this episode is released, it will have the link to the book, and with a description, and it'll be something that we will be taking up in the future as part of our reading sessions as well. Sheikh, I really want to thank you for your time. I know you're extremely busy. You have, you're doing a lot of work, academic and otherwise, and you're around the globe, doing this kind of work, reviving the sort of intellectual dimensions of Islam, the scientific dimension of Islam, and of course the spiritual dimension of Islam. And it's been an honor and pleasure for me particularly, and I'm sure it will be for our viewers and listeners when they watch and they listen to this episode. And so, inshallah, when it permits, we would like a sequel, as they say, to this episode, and maybe even have a trilogy of episodes.
Inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this effort that we have done together.
Ameen.
And bring openings to the hearts, to the
Ameen.
yearning hearts, and hope to the Ummah, and elimination of the suffering of the Ummah at present. And I'm really hopeful that inshallah your generation is going to make a major contribution towards the revival of the worldly as well as the spiritual state of the Ummah. And this project that we are doing, the Integrated Encyclopedia of the Quran, the second volume is actually going to print later this month, inshallah. So this is a huge undertaking in itself, and this I consider my life's work. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it. What it does is it brings connections to the tradition through 525 articles dealing with all persons, concepts, places, things, and events mentioned in the Quran. So I'm really thankful to you for the time that you have taken to read the book, and for the questions and conversation we had. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh. And to our viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll see you in our next episode.
ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب.